So the Honda Hornet was announced earlier this week, and naturally I published a video all about it, which then blew up pretty quickly. More views in the first few hours than I've had on anything this year, I reckon, and I can tell from the vast number of comments left on that video that it's because it sparked a reaction, both good and bad. So in this video I'm going to answer some of the comments and questions. First up, why did they use a parallel twin and ditch the inline 4 of the CB650R and the original Hornet? Look, I went through this recently on a video where I talk about Suzuki dropping the SV650, and the parallel twins got a bunch of benefits. I mean, firstly, they're cheaper to make because there's just one cylinder head and one set of cams. They're more compact, which makes it easier to position them in the chassis and leaves space in behind for the airbox and electronics. It's probably lighter than an inline 4, and weight loss versus the CB650R was a big target for the Hornet. And then power is almost as good as that bike, and it makes it lower in the revs, which makes it easier to access, and that's part of the twin cylinder configuration. Plus, it makes a lot more torque, and it makes that lower in the revs as well. Then you've got the fact that it should sound and feel quite nice because it's got the 270-degree crank as opposed to the 180 that they've got in their 500s, and the benefits are, plentiful. I do get what some people are saying. There's something brilliant about an inline 4 that gave the CB650 a certain je ne sais quoi. It's got a bit of a sports bike feel to it, and there are too many parallel twins on the market now. There are absolutely loads of them, but it is what it is. They make absolute sense for the business. Secondly, a lot of people are saying that it's no longer truly a Hornet. Well, the previous Hornet was a bit of an icon for being a fun, affordable naked, and I think that's what they're kind of getting at here. Sure, it's a shame to lose that inline 4 because it was a big part of the original Hornet's identity, but Honda aren't the only brand to make use of their historically famous model names. I mean, take the R7, for example, from Yamaha. That's been a great success, even though it's not the inline 4 of the homologation special it got the name from, nor the R6 that it replaced. Triumph use historical names all the time, like the Trident or the Rocket. Both of those are not really anything like the bikes that originally bore the name. Now, an interesting question is why I think it's going to replace the CB650R. Some comments saying that Honda haven't said anything about that bike, being dropped, but manufacturers rarely like to make a big statement or a big deal about retiring models. It's just not the sort of coverage that they want. But in the press release for the Hornet, it says the Hornet steel diamond frame is lightweight at just 16.6 kilograms, and for comparison, the CB650Rs is 18.5. Manufacturers never slag off their own bikes in the press materials, even if it's true. The only reason they would do is if they're trying to show some kind of improvement from one previous bike to a new one. That's why I think they'll wind it up in favor of the new CB750. Plus, this 750 massively undercuts the CB650R on price, and yet it has more tech, more torque, and less weight. It's almost $1,000 cheaper, and they're way too close in price and capability to sustain both. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if they run them alongside for, a year or part of a model year, especially with all the supply chain issues that manufacturers are having at the moment, but eventually, surely, the Hornet will replace the CB, because otherwise it'll just eat up all the sales because it's cheaper and, on paper, better, even if it's not anywhere near as good looking. Now, before we get on to the price and the specifics around that, I just want to say a massive thanks to Manscape for sponsoring the channel. Manscape make a huge range of male grooming products, from deodorants and shaving gels and body washes to their awesome gadgets like the Lawnmower 4.0 skin-safe body hair trimmer and their Weed Whacker ear and nose hair trimmer. But if you're not sure where to start with all of this, then I'd thoroughly recommend one of their bundles. The Perfect Package 4.0 is great for starting out because not only do you get their Lawnmower 4.0, but also their ball deodorant and toner sprays. With the Performance Package 4.0, you get the same stuff plus the Weed Whacker, so great for those people with hairy noses and ears. And then the ultimate bundle is their Platinum Package, which gets you the absolute works, including their shower gel, which is a personal favorite of mine. It smells absolutely banging. They're brilliant value, plus they include 2 free gifts. So firstly, a Manscaped leather travel bag, and then also a pair pair of Manscaped boxers. So head to manscaped.com today, use MOTOBOB as a voucher code at the checkout, and you'll get 20% off, plus the free gifts and free international shipping. What a deal. So once again, a massive thanks to Manscaped for their support. Now the next one, I had plenty of comments saying, oh, this bike's going to be too expensive. Clearly you didn't watch the video, because I talked about the price near to the end of the video, and it is really exceptional. It's £6,999 at launch in the UK. When you look at something like the MT-07, you know, the Hornet comes up 200 quid cheaper and it gets 20 more horsepower, loads of great electronics, whereas the Yamaha gets basically none, better forks, better brakes. And so for me, that price looks like a massive competitive strength. Whether it's actually as fun as the MT out on the road remains to be seen, but on paper, it does look really strong. I also got plenty of questions about why I chose to compare it to those specific bikes. Now, why did I compare it to the CB650R? Well, it's the closest bike in the current Honda lineup, and it looks like it's going to replace it. Why did I compare it to the Trident, the MT-07, the Z650, and the SV650? Because all those bikes come in at the same price point, and they're the ones you'd consider if you wanted a budget-friendly middleweight naked. Why didn't I compare it to the KTM 890 and the Aprilia Tuono 660? Because those bikes are in a different price point. You know, they're a couple of grand more than any of the other bikes that I've mentioned. Granted, the prices vary internationally, and some dealers are offering massive discounts on stuff like the Tuono, but in terms of UK RRP, which is the only consistent measure I've got across all these bikes, the more budget-friendly models are in a different price bracket. Also, a few of you asked whether it's actually fair to compare a 750 to a bunch of 650s. Now, I don't think anyone buys a bike because it's a certain capacity unless they're on a specific license or maybe racing in a specific class, which I don't think is going to be the case with the Hornet. There's a price point that you're willing to go up to, and you just go into the dealer and get the best bike that you can for your money. So that's why I'm comparing it to those other bikes. They're at the same price point, and that's what matters most when you're at the dealer, not the 100cc bracket that each bike fits into. Will they use this engine in other bikes? Well, almost certainly. A middleweight adventure bike has been spied out testing basically a baby Africa twin, but with the historic Transalp name. And I wouldn't be surprised if it eventually goes into an R7 rival, so like a sports bike, especially with that impressive peak power output. I'm sure they could stick it in a retro style thing, maybe a middleweight tourer like an NT750. And I guess that's the beauty of the parallel twin. It sort of works in most applications, despite being a bit commonplace now. But the most common comment has to be about the looks though. Some people really don't seem to like it. Specifically, the headlight seems to be triggering. There are plenty of comparisons with the CB500, with which it does share a lot of its looks, and I get it, it's not the most exciting bike to look at, and certainly something like the Trident has a lot more personality. The SV for me as well is quite a nice looking bike, despite looking like it's coming to the end of its lifetime soon, and possibly the fact that the CB650R is such a nice looking bike as well, you know, that doesn't help. But for me, without that context, just looking at it for what it is, it's perfectly fine. It's no better or worse than the Z650 or the MT-07, both of which sort of share that generic angular Japanese design. So I guess it depends on what's most important to you, but personally, I'm looking forward to swinging a leg over it. Also, there's some complaints about the skinny 160 section rear tire, because some of the competition get a 180, which gives them a bit more of that big bike kind of vibe. Again, if you're just buying the bike for looks, then sure, get the one with the 180, but I assume Honda have built this one with a 160 to balance out fuel economy and handling, and so it's probably the best size of tire for the job, because generally, having sold 20 million bikes a year or whatever, they're probably better at designing motorcycles than you or I. Now look, now that I've gone over it all again, I'd love to know down in the comments if I've changed your mind about this bike. And so if you're new here and you want to see more videos like this, there are loads of new bikes coming up in the next few months, including the Suzuki Parallel Twin that will replace the SV650, so a direct competitor for the Hornet. Then hit subscribe because we'll be covering them in all the detail, and I'll look forward to seeing you then.